I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Bre Rossetti.
The world is complex for consumers. It's so complex for marketers. You need to surround people with different experiences and different messages, and different people respond to different types of messages. And it's really easy to get lost in the sauce of it all, especially if you are somebody who relies on data and relies on rigor. So I think we really touch the stone first and foremost and understand what is the center of gravity for the brand.
Bre Rossetti is Arnold's Chief Strategy Officer, overseeing the integrated strategy offering at the agency. Bre has been critical to the evolution of Arnold's strategic offering, thanks to her ability to understand the combination of brand strategy and comms planning that has become one of Arnold's secret weapons. She has led brands that include Puma, Fidelity, Domino's, McDonald's, and TripAdvisor. Bre currently oversees all clients at Arnold, including PNC Bank, Progressive Insurance, ADP, and Walmart's Sam's Club. My interview with Bre Rossetti is coming right up. But first,
my dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big MQL man. Then he just kept saying things like, "The more MQLs, the better," over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means marketing qualified lead. One thing's for sure. I'll be known as the MQL man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business too? Caroline Kay hosts a great podcast called Snippets of Genius. Caroline, tell us what these folks will get out of listening.
Snippets of Genius is a lighthearted business podcast with some brilliant insights into how you can attract and cultivate success. In each episode, I have an inspiring conversation with genius guests from the worlds of business development, marketing, design, and wellness. Each of them share their ballsy, daring moves to burst business opportunities wide open. Every episode is designed to give you as much value as possible so you can decide, define, and develop anything you want in your career or business.
Hard to turn that down. Where can people subscribe?
They can come on over to my website, which is www.carolinekay.co/podcast, or find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or search for Snippets of Genius wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Bre Rossetti, welcome to On Brand.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you for having me.
I am excited to chat. You talk about the secret weapon of Arnold, and that got my attention because a lot of times when it comes to creative agencies, we so often lead with the bold, edgy, creative work. But talking about the combination of brand strategy and comms planning is a bit like eating your vegetables. We understand that it's important, but we're not always that enthusiastic. So talk about that secret weapon and why it's so important at Arnold.
I love that, eating your vegetables. Very, very true. Well, I thought one of the questions that you might ask me sort of at the end of this call of this recording, rather than at the beginning, was, what's the work that I'm most proud of? And I had thought about that, and I thought, it's really difficult to choose amongst your children. But I think the work that I'm most proud of is actually the positioning that we've done for the agency. The creative agency landscape and agencies as a whole, as you know, is just incredibly crowded. It's a really fragmented market. It's difficult to discern. You're only as good as the talent that you have. And when I took this role in February 2020 and thought I was going to have all of this time, talking about the agency out in the world and working with all of the great talent, and then the world shut down, we sort of focused inward and we had to rediscover who we were as an agency and what really made us different. And the positioning that we landed on, which I think embodies really what we do, is we make it safe to be brave. And the underlying idea there is that your bravest idea and your smartest idea should be the same idea. I think there's this pull in our industry to either be brave or either be smart, be analytical and eat your vegetables, or do great, amazing culture driving work. And we sort of rejected that philosophy outright. And I think it's really interesting, and I'm really proud that we get to be at a place that talks about how we make people, how we make our clients, how we make brands feel in order to get to that great work. So that sort of psychological safety to get to brave work, to feel that, you've got the nutrients, that you've got the different flavors of strategy, that you've come up with an idea, not just an idea that's going to, live in a Keynote deck or Google Slides, as so many do, but actually get out there in the world. So that's sort of, I think, the special sauce and the thing that I'm most proud of.
Well, I love that you kept the eating of the vegetables, the special sauce, the culinary theme of the question, because that was obviously the most important aspect of all of it. But I love
Absolutely.
how you anchored that with psychological safety, because I think kind of with the setup of that question, there is, like you said, there's this kind of false binary imposed that it's an either or. And, as in many settings, the both and is so much stronger. But in this case, harder to execute, and promoting that psychological safety is key in being brave. So how have been some approaches to, because psychological safety is something else that is something that's easy to agree with but hard to do. So how do you end up providing clients with that psychological safety to feel comfortable and confident for the bold work?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes back to something very simple, which is all having a common understanding of the brand and what the brand idea is. I think, with my background being across creative and media and comms, I think that there's a deep understanding that I have, and, that we have and our clients have, that the world is complex for consumers. It's so complex for marketers. You need to surround people with different experiences and different messages, and different people respond to different types of messages. And it's really easy to get lost in the sauce of it all, especially if you are somebody who relies on data and relies on rigor. So I think we really touch the stone first and foremost and understand what is the center of gravity for the brand. What is the core idea? What is the overall feeling? And I think there's a real sense of discipline that we and our clients and great brands, even the ones that we don't work with that I admire, really bring to the table. And I think for me, it's a real balance between a short-term and a long-term mindset, because I think that, if you look at great work in the world, I think sometimes it can feel somewhat sporadic, right? Great social work, great cultural things that happen. They happen and everybody flocks to them, and then they're over, and then you move on. But I think the great brands and the things that we try to do is make the sum greater than its parts. And from a technique or an advice perspective, that's really about, first and foremost, grounding yourself in the brand and the simplicity of the brand. And I think I always say that, strategy creates the space for ideas. It's not about coming up with the idea, but it's about understanding that space that you exist within, most importantly.
So with an approach like that, you talked about, both brands you work with and brands that you observe. Is there a strategic touchstone that is, as you mentioned, who is this brand? What's most important? Does it become like a touchstone that you can use to reference back to across a spectrum of communication media planning?
You're going to hate my answer to this question because it is ill-defined. But what I've learned, especially as we exist in this sort of yes and space, is the things that I crave and love as a strategist, which is we do a thing called brand center, and it really is distilling the center of gravity for the brand and, imagining your brand foundation in all of the ways. We do a thing called comms 2.0, which is, reimagining comms planning for a more modern world where we don't just rely on matching luggage and funnels and the simplicity of single-minded channels. But the reality is, as much as I love all of those things and all of those playbooks, you have to allow for the magic to happen. And with the brands that I've been fortunate to work with, we've had these incredible long-term relationships, and the brands have been very disciplined. I look at Progressive Insurance. I look at times when I worked with Titleist, Jack Daniels. Those are all brands that have, stood the test of time and grown and evolved and flexed, but never really lost their sense of self. And I think in order to do that, you have to be willing to break out of the playbook and break out of the lines. And when we talk about Safe to Be Brave and talk about psychological safety, it's about understanding the rules so that you know when to break them, so that you know when to take an opportunity and go with it from a creative perspective. When you know to protect your tone, to protect your brand DNA, not because you have a 28-page brand book that tells you to do so, but because you have cultivated the core and essence of a brand in a way that you're thinking about your consumers and that people really like to enjoy, and in a way that you could spot opportunities in culture that you should be playing in.
I love so much of that, and again, this is like the metaphor show, because I had to stop myself from laughing out loud at the you said relying on the matched luggage and funnels, and we laugh, but I feel like sometimes when you talk about brand building and getting strategic, and a lot of the words that integrating throughout everything, it's easy for it to get boiled down to matched luggage. And I think you talking about the need for a center of gravity is critical in really getting back to our first metaphor, eating the vegetables of strategy. So how does one, as you look at larger organizations with many, many kind of tentacles of their own, how do you communicate that center of gravity internally so that everyone is on the same page? Because the brand voice can get distributed across a wide variety of personnel and channels.
Yeah. Well, I will acknowledge it is incredibly hard. And I think that the tendency and the desire for the playbook and the completeness and the set of 5 words that you can hand off down a line of 64 people getting to the community manager is very real. And so I think that the time and the care that it takes to distill should be matched by the time and care that it takes to spread that across an organization. I'll tell you, PNC Bank is a client of ours, and we just launched a new brand platform, brilliantly boring, very recently. And there's lots rolling out, but we spent an enormous amount of time working with their internal organization and developing materials for 60,000 of their associates with their CEO on stage, explaining the idea and the strategy and the insight behind that platform and behind that campaign. And we continue to spend that time internally as they think about how that influences their experience, their branch materials, their sponsorships, obviously, their marketing communications, but also, products and all of those things. So I think we do not underestimate that. And it really is a journey. I think, as I compare clients like PNC that are embarking on this amazing journey, the job that needs to be done for them versus a client that has 30 or 40 years of longevity and then is enlisting new participants into the organization, it really is an evolution over time. But there are plenty of materials that we create. There are plenty of techniques and workshops, but I really think that it is about making the time and making sure that it is embraced truly from the top down, because I think we increasingly live in a world where the value of a brand, at least I believe, is incredibly important to an organization's business and financial success.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big MQL man. Then he just kept saying things like, the more MQLs, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means marketing qualified lead. One thing's for sure. I'll be known as the MQL man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business too? Caroline Kay hosts a great podcast called Snippets of Genius. Caroline, tell us what these folks will get out of listening.
Snippets of Genius is a lighthearted business podcast with some brilliant insights into how you can attract and cultivate success. In each episode, I have an inspiring conversation with genius guests from the worlds of business development, marketing, design, and wellness. Each of them share their ballsy, daring moves to burst business opportunities wide open. Every episode is designed to give you as much value as possible so you can decide, define, and develop anything you want in your career or business.
Hard to turn that down. Where can people subscribe?
They can come on over to my website, which is www.carolinekay.co/podcast, or find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or search for Snippets of Genius wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show. So, taking a step back and looking at the landscape today, what do you see on the horizon that presents challenges for everything that we've talked about, a more strategic, integrated brand experience?
You know, I think one of the things that presents challenges is our industry often discovers the best work through our feeds on LinkedIn, and we forget how to be consumers. We get lost in, the language that we have made up, congratulating each other, and we forget about real people experiencing and seeing our brands. So I think that's potentially a real danger, the echo chamber of our industry, because I think if you look not even that closely, it's pretty easy to see that from a consumer perspective, there's lots of great work going on. It's not just coming from what we would think of as marketers. It's coming from creators. It's coming from sports teams. It's coming from Taylor Swift. It's coming from Warner Brothers and the Barbie movie. And we have to understand and figure out how to compete with that. I've been lucky in my career to work on both the creative side and the media side, and I feel that that's really benefited me because media really is the front lines of culture. And I think understanding media brands as brands themselves and consuming them as consumers is something that's critical in any marketer's toolkit as we look at the future.
I love that kind of call to, look outside our echo chamber, because I think with, the kind of downside of how deep we can drill down is that sometimes that's all we do, instead of looking for, what can my B2B brand learn from Taylor Swift? And, some might groan or eye roll, and I don't have time for them anyway. But where should we be looking for those next ideas? How can we not get, like you said, lost in our LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think we have to get out in the world, and I don't think it's a specific place. I think it's many places, but I think it's the mindset with which we enter it. If you're switching from LinkedIn to Instagram and you're still in your, I'm a marketer mindset, you might view something very differently than as a consumer. I think it's also really important to talk to people in this world where everything's at our fingertips and we've all got, 14 emerging AI assistants. It's incredibly easy to forget that we need to talk to our consumers. And in some ways, sometimes it feels like that's a little bit of a lost art. So I spend a lot of time just talking to people and acting as a consumer and truthfully, that's why I got into this job. When, I was in college sitting in my biochemistry class, I was incredibly jealous of all the people in advertising who said, that they got to go and do campaigns about cake. And so they went to bakeries and baked cakes. And that sounded incredibly enjoyable and much better than learning the periodic table. So I think that's what's most important. Of course, I could tell you, go to concerts and, follow people whose views you do not agree with, and go to, the forest corners of Reddit and TikTok. And of course, that is true. But I think the mindset with which you enter is the most important.
That is so critical, and especially the nugget in there that you mentioned about looking at other viewpoints, because how we're shaped on social media, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's elsewhere, we're increasingly only around people that are like us or aligned with us, and that'll only get us so far, and certainly won't lead to standing out in the noise, which is both harder than ever, especially for brands today. You talked about your studying biology. Is there anything that you find, because I'm also someone that was psychology and theater arts and ended up in brand building, and in a strange way, it set me up for it perfectly, understanding human behavior and creativity. Is there anything that you bring with you from background studying biology or other diverse subjects that has turned out to be a good fit in the world of brand building?
There's a few pharma campaigns I worked on where I think I impressed people with some little tidbits of knowledge. But what I actually think really shaped me is after college, I went to London for 6 or 7 years, and I worked there. And I think that was quite impactful for me. It was, obviously before a work from home environment, before a Zoom environment, even before we, did lots and lots of conference calls. And I was very lucky because the UK is, a smaller space physically. And as a result, all of the media brands and the clients and the agencies and the marketers were concentrated in London. So we had a lot of like a mashup in terms of the way that different agencies and different disciplines work together, which I think, and I've observed, is harder in the US because of our physical locations and dispersion. The other thing is the UK is a really fascinating environment to go to for anybody who works in marketing, because they have this, big looming brand of the royal family. They also have a tabloid press environment where media brands themselves have such an impact on culture and market themselves in such a significant way. And so it was really interesting to go there as somebody who had not grown up there, but was interested in marketing and branding and the media landscape, and to absorb that and then to come back here to the US. So I think that's had a significant impact on my worldview and my view of how culture is shaped.
That is awesome. As we look at several things looming on the horizon, whether it's, economic uncertainty, AI, what are you keeping your eye on for your clients?
All of those things, but you don't. Maybe there's some more positive things besides.
There we
those.
go. Yeah. Okay.
Of course, we must keep an eye on those factors. But I think, I was talking to somebody recently, and I think we're at this sort of like generational apex point, right? A decade ago, or maybe a little bit more, maybe I'm dating myself. Everybody was like, oh, these millennials, who are they? And what is happening? And now obviously that's the conversation around Gen Z. And I think it's really interesting. I think it actually happens when a generation reaches like a break point on the media buying demographic. You're like, oh, 18 to 34. I can't shorthand that for millennials anymore. I must pay attention to Gen Z. And I think it's a really interesting phenomenon, which is inward facing about our industry. But I think that I have a lot of excitement around the next generation, around Gen Z. And I'm very glad that clients are paying attention, because I think for all of the, typical doom and gloom of, will they have full-time jobs, and will they be at home, and are they loyal to brands? I see an enormous amount of creativity and positivity, and a generation that is so hungry for culture and so welcoming of things that entertain them, that are weird and wonderful, and, born of the internet. And I find that incredibly exciting. That's why I think we do what we do. And I think it spells an enormous amount of opportunity despite the economic backdrop.
I love it. In search of the weird and creative and everything in between. Well, certainly with our various metaphors, you've made me smile many times throughout this conversation, but it is now my turn to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Okay. Well, there's quite a few. I was at upfronts this week, and I was incredibly encouraged because the old upfronts used to be these networks and cable, and now you've got Netflix doing an upfront, and then you've also got basically streaming packages bundling and offering cable again, and so I guess we're back, baby. But it's always fun to hear what everybody's talking about there. And there was something that I hadn't seen that was shown to me, which I thought it really made me smile. And it was Sherwin-Williams, who created a custom color for Shark Week, based on the palette of the ocean. And I thought that was just brilliant and lovely. And I loved that. And the other one that made me sort of laugh out loud yesterday was, I don't know if you saw, but obviously the NFL, when they release their schedule, many of the teams do something on social. And the Chargers released a video that was Sims inspired, which I really loved. And I think they had a little Easter egg at the end of that, which I thought was very timely. And I love when brands can be very timely and a little cheeky.
Well played. I saw that. Great smiles all the way around. Bre, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, they can always go to Arnold. They can email me at bre@arn.com, or of course, head to my LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Bre Rossetti, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks so much, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business too? Caroline Kay hosts a great podcast called Snippets of Genius. Caroline, tell us what these folks will get out of listening.
Snippets of Genius is a lighthearted business podcast with some brilliant insights into how you can attract and cultivate success. In each episode, I have an inspiring conversation with genius guests from the worlds of business development, marketing, design, and wellness. Each of them share their ballsy, daring moves to burst business opportunities wide open. Every episode is designed to give you as much value as possible so you can decide, define, and develop anything you want in your career or business.
Hard to turn that down. Where can people subscribe?
They can come on over to my website, which is www.carolinekay.co/podcast, or find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or search for Snippets of Genius wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.